There are moments when wildlife professionals who've seen everything, bear attacks, wildfires, poaching scenes, encounter something that breaks through years of emotional armor, something so devastating it haunts them for the rest of their careers. Montana State Park Rangers. Jake Sullivan and Maria Torres had responded to hundreds of wildlife emergencies over 15 combined years of service, but nothing prepared them for the emergency call that came on a September morning. Reports of bear vocalizations coming from an abandoned homestead well 15 miles into wilderness backcountry. When they arrived and looked down into that 50-foot pit, what they saw in the darkness below made Maria physically collapse, and Jake radio for every available ranger, veterinarian, and rescue specialist in a 3-county radius. A mother grizzly bear had fallen into the well, but she hadn't fallen alone, and she wasn't dead. She was standing in 3 feet of freezing water at the bottom of that abandoned well, holding something above the waterline with her body, making sounds that communicated desperation so profound that both rangers later described it as the moment they understood that animal suffering and human suffering were identical. What they found at the bottom of that well would require the most dangerous wildlife rescue operation in Montana history, would test every limit of compassion and courage, and would prove that maternal love exists in a place deeper than species, deeper than instinct, deeper even than the will to survive. Jake Sullivan and Maria Torres were conducting routine backcountry patrol in the Cabinet Mountains wilderness when dispatch relayed an unusual report. Hikers had heard distressed bear vocalizations coming from an abandoned homestead site, sounds that had continued for hours, suggesting an animal in crisis rather than normal territorial behavior. They hiked to the coordinates, an old homestead abandoned in the 1950s, now reclaimed by forest except for a few collapsing structures, and, critically, an old hand-dug well that should have been sealed decades ago but had been left open, a death trap waiting for wildlife. "You hear that?" Maria asked as they approached. Bear vocalizations were coming from somewhere close, but not from the forest, from below ground level. They found the well, a circular stone-lined pit approximately 4 feet in diameter, 50 feet deep, with no cover. Jake shined his flashlight down into the darkness, and his blood ran cold. "Maria, we have a grizzly down there, adult female, maybe 400 pounds, standing in water." But as his eyes adjusted to the shadows, he saw more. The mother bear wasn't alone at the bottom of that well. She was standing protectively over something. 3 small shapes pressed against the well wall, partially submerged. "Cubs," Maria breathed, looking through her own flashlight beam. "Jake, she has 3 cubs down there with her. They're tiny, maybe 4 months old, and the water level is rising. There's a spring feeding that well." They'd both seen enough wildlife tragedies to understand immediately. The mother had probably been foraging near the well when one cub fell in. Mother bears were fiercely protective. She would have gone in after her baby without hesitation. But the well's stone walls were smooth, offering no purchase for climbing. Once in, there was no way out for a 400-pound bear. "How long have they been down there?" Jake asked. Maria studied the scene, the bear's exhausted posture, the cub's weak movements. Based on the vocalizations hikers reported and the bear's condition, I'd estimate at least 24 hours. Jake assessed the situation with cold professional clarity that barely masked his horror. The mother bear was standing in frigid spring water that reached mid-body, using her own mass to create a barrier keeping the water from reaching her 3 cubs, who were huddled on a slightly elevated rock ledge. But the water was still rising, slowly but inevitably. "If that water keeps rising, the cubs will drown," Maria said, her voice tight. "And the mother knows it. Look at her posture. She's exhausting herself keeping the water away from them." The mother bear looked up at them, made a sound that wasn't aggression but desperation, and shifted her position to better shield her cubs from the rising water. One cub made a weak crying sound. They were hypothermic, starving, and running out of time. "We need swift water rescue, large animal veterinary, specialized equipment to extract a 400-pound bear from a 50-foot well," Jake radioed dispatch. "And we need it immediately. These bears have hours, not days." "Copy. Assembling team. ETA 3 hours minimum given location. 3 hours." Jake looked at the cubs, barely moving now, and knew they might not have 3 hours. "The cubs are critical," Maria assessed. "Hypothermia, dehydration, possibly injuries from the fall. We need to get them out first. They're small enough to lift. But Jake, if we go down there, that mother will defend them. She won't understand we're helping." Jake understood the impossible situation. The cubs needed immediate extraction and medical care, but approaching them meant entering a confined space with a terrified, exhausted mother grizzly. It was the kind of decision that either saved lives or ended them. "When the team arrives, we tranquilize the mother first, then extract everyone," Jake decided. "Until then, we monitor and prepare. Maria, document everything. If this goes wrong, someone needs to know what happened here." The rescue team arrived in 2 hours and 40 minutes. A veterinarian, 3 additional rangers, specialized rope rescue equipment, and a large animal transport unit. Dr. Catherine Reed, the wildlife veterinarian, looked down into the well and made an immediate assessment that changed everything. "We can't tranquilize her from up here," Dr. Reed said. "The dart impact could knock her off balance in that confined space. She could fall on the cubs and kill them, or drown in the water while sedated. We need someone to go down there with a hand injection sedative." The team went silent. Going into a 50-foot well with a desperate mother grizzly was a death sentence if anything went wrong. "I'll do it," Jake said immediately. "I'm certified in large predator handling, and I'm the lightest team member for rope work." Maria grabbed his arm. "Jake, if she perceives you as a threat to those cubs, you'll have nowhere to go. That well is 4 feet wide. You can't escape." "Those cubs are dying," Jake said simply. "The mother has been standing in that water for over 24 hours keeping them alive. I'm not going to let them die because I was too afraid to try." They rigged Jake in a harness with a backup belay system, equipped him with a pole syringe containing enough sedative to drop the mother bear safely, and began lowering him into the well. The mother bear watched his descent with increasing agitation, vocalizing warnings, positioning herself protectively over her cubs. "Easy, Mama," Jake called softly as he descended. "I'm here to help. I know you don't understand that, but I'm here to save your babies." 30 feet down, 40 feet. The mother bear's vocalizations intensified. At 45 feet, Jake was close enough to see the cubs clearly. They were barely conscious, soaked, trembling violently from hypothermia. At 50 feet, his boots touched water, and he was face to face with 400 pounds of terrified mother grizzly in a space where neither of them could escape. Jake stood in the frigid water, pole syringe extended, knowing he had one chance. The mother grizzly was 3 feet away, her body blocking his access to the cubs, her eyes showing exhaustion and fear. If she charged, he'd die in this well. If he didn't sedate her, the cubs would die. "I see your babies, Mama," Jake said softly, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I know you've been protecting them. You're an incredible mother, but they need help you can't give them. Please let me try." The bear huffed, shifted her weight, and then something extraordinary happened. She moved slightly to the side, exposing the cubs. Not much, just enough for Jake to see them clearly. It was deliberate. It was permission. Jake moved slowly, extending the pole syringe toward the bear's shoulder muscle. "This is going to hurt for a second, and then you're going to sleep. When you wake up, you'll all be safe. I promise." He pressed the syringe. The bear flinched, huffed sharply, but didn't attack. The sedative worked quickly. Within 90 seconds, her legs weakened, and she carefully lowered herself into the water, her last conscious act positioning herself to avoid crushing her cubs. "She's down," Jake radioed. "Get the basket down here now. Cubs first." The team lowered a rescue basket. Jake waded to the cubs. They were barely responsive, their tiny bodies ice cold. He placed all 3 in the basket gently, and the team hauled them up immediately. Then came the massive challenge, extracting a sedated 400-pound bear from 50 feet down. It required a portable winch, specialized harness, and 40 minutes of careful lifting. When they finally brought the mother to the surface and laid her on the ground beside her cubs, Maria was already performing emergency warming on the babies with heated blankets and glucose injections. "They're alive," Maria said, tears streaming. "Jake, they're all alive." The mother bear, named Athena by the rescue team, and her 3 cubs were transported to the Montana Large Predator Trauma Center. Dr. Reed's assessment was grave. All 3 cubs were critically hypothermic, with core temperatures below 90 degrees, severely dehydrated, and showing early signs of pneumonia from prolonged exposure to cold water. Athena had profound exhaustion, mild hypothermia herself, and had lost significant body weight from over 24 hours of continuous exertion in freezing water. "She burned through every calorie reserve keeping those cubs above water," Dr. Reed explained. "Her body was eating its own muscle tissue. Another 6 hours and she would have collapsed. Then all 4 would have drowned." The cubs, named Hope, Faith, and Valor by the medical team, spent 3 days in intensive care with heated incubators, IV fluids, antibiotics, and round-the-clock monitoring. Athena recovered faster, but she refused to eat or settle until the cubs were brought to where she could see them through observation glass. "She needs to know they're alive," Maria observed during a visit. "She held them above water for over a day. She needs to see that her sacrifice worked." When the cubs were stable enough, staff moved them to an adjacent recovery enclosure where Athena could maintain visual and scent contact. The change in Athena was immediate. She began eating, her stress levels decreased, and she vocalized constantly to her cubs, who responded with weak but clear cries. By week 2, all 3 cubs had recovered enough to be reunited with their mother. The moment Athena could touch them again, she examined each cub thoroughly, sniffing, licking, making soft maternal sounds, clearly checking that they were truly okay. "That's what we found at the bottom of that well," Jake told documentary crews filming the rescue. "A mother who refused to abandon her babies, even though staying meant dying. Athena chose to die with them rather than save herself. That's not instinct, that's love." The recovery took 3 months. Athena regained her weight and strength. Hope, faith, and valor grew into healthy juvenile cubs, hitting every developmental milestone. By December, all 4 bears were assessed as ready for release consideration. Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks selected a protected wilderness area with excellent habitat and no open wells for their release site. The plan was straightforward: transport them together, release them as a family unit, and monitor via GPS collars for the first year. The release occurred on a clear winter morning. Jake and Maria were both present, along with the full rescue and medical teams who'd saved them. When the transport crates opened, Athena emerged first, immediately checking that all 3 cubs were with her. They were. She led them toward the forest, then stopped. She turned back toward the assembled humans, specifically toward Jake, and stood on her hind legs briefly. It was the bear gesture of assessment, but it felt like more, like acknowledgement, like thank you. "She remembers," Maria said quietly. "She knows we helped." Then Athena dropped to all 4s and led her cubs into the wilderness, disappearing into the trees. GPS data tracked them successfully throughout the following years. Athena raised all 3 cubs to independence, a 100% survival rate that was statistically remarkable. Hope, faith, and valor all established their own territories and eventually raised cubs of their own. Athena lived to age 14, producing 2 more litters before dying peacefully during hibernation. The abandoned well that had nearly killed them was permanently sealed with concrete and marked with a wildlife hazard sign. A small plaque was installed: Athena's Well, where a mother's love proved stronger than a 50-foot fall, freezing water, and 24 hours of impossible odds. May we honor her courage by protecting the wild places and wild lives that depend on our compassion. Jake Sullivan never forgot what he'd seen at the bottom of that well. He'd descended expecting to find a bear. What he found was a mother making the same impossible choice any parent would make: staying with her dying children rather than saving herself. "People ask if bears feel love the way we do," Jake said during his final interview before retirement 15 years later. "I stopped asking that question the moment I saw Athena standing in that freezing water, her body positioned to shield 3 cubs from drowning after 24 hours of exhaustion that should have killed her. She chose them. She chose to die with them rather than live without them. That's not animal behavior. That's parental love in its purest, most sacrificial form." Maria Torres went on to develop national protocols for confined space wildlife rescue, using Athena's case as the training foundation. Her manual, titled "When the Bottom Drops Out," became required reading for wildlife rescue teams across North America. Dr. Reed published research analyzing Athena's physiological resilience, documenting how maternal protective instincts could override survival mechanisms, allowing animals to endure conditions that should be fatal. The papers became foundational texts in wildlife behavioral science. But the most powerful legacy was simpler: the story of what rescuers found at the bottom of that well. A mother refusing to abandon her babies even as water rose and death approached, became a testament to the fact that love transcends species, that devotion isn't uniquely human, that the bond between mother and child exists in a place deeper than evolution or instinct. Athena fell 50 feet into darkness, holding her babies. She stood in freezing water for 24 hours, keeping them alive. And when humans finally reached her, she trusted enemies to save what she couldn't protect alone. Some falls don't end in death. Some mothers don't quit. Some love is stronger than 50-foot wells, freezing water, and impossible odds. That's what rangers found at the bottom. That's what destroyed them. That's what changed them forever. If this story devastated you, if it proved that maternal love knows no boundaries or species, if it showed you that the fiercest courage is a mother refusing to abandon her children even when survival demands it, leave a comment about a moment you witnessed love that refused to quit. And if you believe every mother, human or animal, deserves someone willing to descend into darkness to help her, hit subscribe. Because Athena stood in that water for 24 hours, and when help finally came, she trusted her enemies with her babies' lives. Thank you for witnessing her impossible love.